Hello and welcome to HelloMD Live. I'm Pamela Hadfield.
And I'm Dr. Perry Solomon with this week's cannabis news. What do we have?
So Perry, what does gum disease and cannabis have to do with one another?
Well, you'd think nothing.
I would think nothing.
However, you'd be wrong.
You'd be very wrong.
The reason is, in New Zealand, they studied 1,000 people from birth all the way up to age 38. And they were looking for medical issues that would pop up following these people for that long a time, which is since 1973. So what they found was they studied 1,000 people. Out of those 1,000 people, 700 used cannabis on a chronic basis.
Which means every day.
Every day, and they studied these people, what would happen from every day from ages 18 to 38. They found the only medical issue that came up was periodontal disease.
The only issue.
The only
so there
issue.
was no other medical issue at all.
There was no medical issue with
Other
heart
than your
disease.
teeth falling out.
The teeth and the gum issue was an issue, but there was no heart disease, lung disease. They did find a correlation out of those 700 who smoked cigarettes. They had more health issues for sure.
Of course.
But the people who smoked cannabis only, that was the only thing that they found.
And so does it have anything to do with the fact that people who use every single day are so stoned that they would stop brushing their teeth?
They said that the condition and how often they brushed their teeth wasn't a factor. It had to do probably with dry mouth. These people did have good hygiene, but the fact that their mouth was so dry from using cannabis seemed to aid in the periodontal disease that they developed.
Okay, so what's the bottom line here?
Keep your mouth lubricated, drink fluids, and essentially you could avoid that type of periodontal disease as well as going to the dentist.
So so are you saying that if you smoke cannabis on a daily basis and you're drinking water all the time, that would actually stop the gum disease?
That would have to be another study, but that is the implication of what they're saying.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
It is?
So for years, the DEA has been claiming that if you use cannabis, you are at high risk for a serious anxiety disorder, if not becoming bipolar.
Now, didn't the Journal of the American Medical Association just come out with a study that said something different?
Yes, so new research has been published in JAMA Psychiatry Journal that out of a sampling of 35,000 adults. That's not big. What is it? That's huge.
It's huge. It's a huge sample.
A huge sample, 35,000 people they looked at, and they found no correlation between cannabis use and future anxiety disorders.
So there was no depression, increased bipolar disorders in all of these people.
They didn't find it, and this is a foundation of what the DEA has based their argument on with cannabis use, and it's just not the case.
And the DEA, like you said, the DEA has a, quote, fact sheet that obviously isn't factual that linked depression and these disorders with cannabis use multiple times.
Yeah, it's something like 35 times they talk about it and point to this, and it's just this new study and research shows that that's not the case. So that's actually really good news for people who use cannabis, because this has been a concern for a lot of people.
And it probably will be something as well that they could look at to reschedule cannabis out of a Schedule 1 into something else, saying, hey, but we had wrong data before, we didn't know. Maybe they're just ignorant, which could be, and then now they have the information to base a change on something that they found to be factually untrue.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, when you look at recommending physicians, now they know that if they're recommending cannabis, this is actually something that they don't need to be concerned about with their patients. So.
And we found that it helps depression instead of causing it.
Right. So it's all good news.
So that's terrific news.
Yeah. So there's a doctor in New Jersey. He's been locked out of his offices, Perry. Locked out.
Yes, I know, Pamela. I know. Anthony Anzalone is a physician in New Jersey who...
Not just any physician.
He is the physician that does the most amount of cannabis recommendations in New Jersey.
Yeah, and he's been shut out by Regis.
They
knocked him out.
Regis is a national organization that rents out and leases office space throughout the country.
Yes.
And they rented him an office, 3 offices in New Jersey, and just the other day, they wound up locking him out of his office and embarrassing his patients coming in there.
Yeah, and he doesn't even touch the product. He gives consultations to patients often with very serious medical conditions. They walked into his office building, and they were actually publicly humiliated. This is just wrong on so many different levels. That they evicted him from his offices for what, I'm not sure, because he gives consultations to patients. And then they publicly, they say in front of everyone, you can't go see the marijuana doctor.
Okay. We have a little difference of opinion on this. I agree that they should not have embarrassed his patient. That was absolutely wrong. The fact, though, that they can determine who their tenant is a completely different issue. And they have a right to say, listen, we don't mind you working in this office, we just don't want you doing cannabis recommendations, which federally is still illegal.
Perhaps, but I think that also that they haven't even come out with any sort of public statement.
And
they haven't said to
right.
anyone why they're doing this.
And they should respond to that.
They should respond to this, and I think the fact that he is one of the most public treating physicians for cannabis in the state, somebody should be bringing this to light.
He does 12% of the recommendations that's been done in New Jersey, and that said, he is seeing patients now in a hotel in New Jersey, so that
don't tell the hotel.
The hotel probably doesn't know what's going on. But he is still seeing patients and taking care of their medical recommendations.
Well, that's good for the patient, but I still think that this is a case of discrimination, and that Regis should be ashamed of themselves.
And I think the courts will have a say in who's right and wrong in this.
I'm sure they will. Oh, those teenagers, Perry, what are they doing now?
Or what are they not doing?
What they're not doing, they're not using cannabis as much as people think they are or were.
But that's the whole premise. I mean, all these opponents say that, hey, if it's legalized in states, kids will use it.
Absolutely. But from 2002 to 2013, it appears that teen cannabis use went down by 10%.
And it was a lot of kids. It wasn't just a small
lot of
study.
kids. No, it was over 216,000 kids were observed across all of the 50 states. And what they found is that they're actually not using cannabis in the way that they thought they were.
Huh.
And they're just not using it as much, I should say.
Well, it's interesting because when cannabis was legalized for medicinal purposes in California in 1996, everyone thought, oh my God, the teen use is going to go up. And another study came out in 2015 saying essentially teen use hasn't gone up at all that time from 1996. In Colorado and Washington, the same deal.
Yeah, it's exactly the same deal. And so all those opponents of legalization, they don't really have a leg to stand on at this point because the study shows that it's not the case.
So in the states now, because there's 25 states now that have it where it's legalized either for recreation or for medicinal, those other states that don't, that's not an argument they can use anymore.
No, they can't use that argument, and so I guess teens are doing their homework now.
Well, that's great. That's stay in school.
So good news for all of you Buckeyes out there. What happened in Ohio?
Well, Ohio joined now the majority of the states in America that legalize cannabis for medicinal reasons.
I think it's the 26th state, isn't it?
It's 26 plus DC.
The dominoes keep falling.
And eventually more and more will fall into that. And Governor Kasich said he's reviewing it, but he will sign it. And what they're able to do is have a large amount of medical conditions, almost as many as California, to be able to use medical cannabis for.
And that's one of the bigger differences with what's going on in Ohio is that so many of the states are so restrictive with the medical conditions, and if you open it up, that means that more patients are going to have more access. But what are they actually going to have access to?
Well, they'll have everything. They'll have access to everything except to be able to smoke it. They're able to have edibles, oils, tinctures, and vaping, which more and more people seem to be progressing to anyway.
So that's interesting. And so when is this going to happen for people?
In 2017, they'll start being available. They're still working out the details as to how it's going to be sold, etc. And it was interesting because the legislatures came up with this law to stop a referendum that was going to happen in November, that the people, like over 65% of the people in Ohio, want to have some type of cannabis regulations.
It's interesting, and I was also reading that there were some opponents to this legislation, and some of the opponents actually thought it was way too restrictive.
Well, the one in the referendum in November was going to be very open in terms of conditions, who can grow it, because the legislation that came from the legislature is that they can't have any home grow, while in November they were going to say, yes, you can grow your cannabis at home. So they didn't want that, so they made this legislation to stop that other one from happening.
Well, I think it's fantastic, and Ohio is definitely moving in the right direction, don't you think?
Absolutely. And I think either they'll open it up more to people to be able to grow, hopefully they'll open up more restrictions, they'll open up more medical conditions as well. But the way it stands right now, it's a very good law, and I'm glad it passed.
Way to go, Ohio. All right, so Perry, how often do you use the Keurig in the kitchen?
I go in the kitchen and use the Keurig multiple times a day just because it's so easy to use.
Well, the next thing out is called the CannaCloud, and it is a K-cup vaporizer that's going to sit on your counter. You put a K-cup in full of your cannabis,
Mm-hmm.
and you instantly can vaporize.
So it comes pre-filled with different types of cannabis, and the top pops and gets heated up. What happens?
Well, the unit that you can see right here is $149. It does not come pre-filled with your cannabis.
Oh.
You will need to actually go out to a dispensary and buy those.
Like you do anyway.
Like you do anyway.
Okay.
But what you do is you buy this vaporizer, you go to your dispensary, you buy a K-cup, which is going to have your cannabis in it, you pop it in, you push it down, and then it percolates just like the K-cup or the Keurig in the kitchen, and you can instantly vaporize.
And if you have your own cannabis, though, they said that you'll be able to eventually come up and be able to do the same thing with your own.
Exactly. So you can pack your own little K-cup. I'm not sure why you would necessarily want to do that, but I think what's interesting about this is it's basically the next generation of cannabis user. We're going to be seeing more and more products like this come out in the market.
So they're targeting people who don't want to touch it or roll it anything like that?
I think what we find with the patients that come through is that there's a large percentage of people that are really confused by going into a dispensary, looking at, what is it, 20, 30, 40 different flowers, not really understanding what it is to do with it, how to use it, what you do once you get home, all of that sort of stuff. And so this sort of takes the thinking out of it.
So they're appealing to a different type of population.
I think it's a different demographic for sure. I think it's more middle-aged to older consumers, and obviously I think that you're going to have more medicinal patients that really need instant relief, and that's where vaporizing is a great method for ingesting cannabis.
That is good. Well, K-cup is good.
K-cup is good.
I like that.
Yeah, so this will be coming out on the market, I think, in this coming fall, and will be in Colorado.
In Boulder, of course.
Of course. Where all great things start.
It's a great story, and I assume we'll be able to see a demonstration of this at some point in time.
At some point. Okay, until next week.
Thanks very much.